welcome to episode number 36 of At Your Service with Haber and Martinez. Today's episode is entitled The Echo Effect, From Shots to Slaps to the 3 C's, which are cops, courts, and constitutions. Ed and I are going to talk today about all sorts of stuff, and we're going to use Will Smith and the Academy Awards as our gravamen, as our foundation for today's discussion. Not that we all haven't had enough of Will Smith, I'm sure, but just to remind you, in case you folks haven't seen it, or for whatever reasons you forgot about it, if our producer could go ahead and roll our video, we'll remind you of what happened last Sunday at the Academy Awards.
Wife with no hair. That wasn't very funny, Willie. That wasn't very funny, Willie.
Uh-oh, Richard.
Keep my wife's name out your beautiful fucking mouth.
So basically, that's what happened at the Academy Awards a week ago on Sunday, the 27th.
I wish.
You want to see the real thing? All right, go ahead. Cue up the real video. Let's see what actually happened.
Oh.
You know who's got the hardest job tonight? Javier Bardem and his wife are both nominated. Now, if she loses, he can't win. He is praying that Will Smith wins. Like, please, Lord. Jada, I love you. G.I. Jane 2, can't wait to see it. All right? That was a nice one. Okay. I'm out here. Uh-oh, Richard. Oh, wow. Wow. Will Smith just smacked the shit out of me.
Keep my wife's name out your fucking mouth.
Wow, dude.
Yeah.
It was a G.I. Jane jump.
Keep my wife's name out your fucking mouth.
I'm going to, okay? Okay. That was a greatest night in the history of television. Okay. Okay.
So that's what happened, and that has now been dubbed, quote, the slap that was heard around the world. Just to give you a little historical context, there actually is something called the shot that was heard around the world. And the shot that was heard around the world is the opening salvo that occurred in the battles of Concord and Lexington that started the American Revolutionary War. And so since 1775, when that occurred, the first sound of the first projectile being expelled from the first musket of the first battle, that's the shot heard around the world. This is now the slap heard around the world. And as we all know, the echo effect, or an echo, is a reverberation of sound. So what Ed and I want to do today is, again, using this as our foundation, the Will Smith incident, talk a little bit about the echo effect of the slap heard around the world. The laws of assault and battery, affirmative defenses, the way that investigations into these things go, types of evidence, the way that the state might go about preserving evidence or presenting evidence, how the defense might attack it, who's right, who's wrong, whether or not words can ever justify acts of violence, etc. And I guess we need to do that in a way a little bit with some historical context as to our own criminal justice system and the way that it's set up here as opposed to other places in the world. With that said, hello, Ed. Good to see you.
Good to see you, my friend.
How'd you like that cartoon?
I like the cartoon a lot better than the second one. Honestly, the real thing is hard to watch on so many levels, Michael, on so many levels. And I feel bad for almost everybody, including Jada Pinkett Smith, who I think is probably the one who's causing these issues. And I don't mean to put blame. What I mean is she's the root of it, right? Because Will Smith is a grown man and he has choices he can make and he should be making. But I think, looking at it now, second time around, you can see that there's something going on emotionally, psychologically with Will Smith. He's not well. Did you see the dead look? Did you see the shark eyes? I never noticed
like a doll's eyes, shark eyes, like a doll's eyes.
Did you see those eyes when he said, "Keep your name out, keep my wife's name out"? Dude, something wrong with Will. He needs some help. But
I think there's more evidence to that too. The range of emotion, and obviously we didn't provide all the footage, but anybody who looks can see for themselves. It starts with Will Smith laughing, right? I mean, first there's that joke about Javier Bardem and his wife, and Will Smith is laughing at that. And then he switches over starts talking about Will Smith and Javier for the Academy Award, Best Actor, and Will Smith's laughing at that. And then he makes the G.I. Jane joke, and Will Smith is laughing at that. Right. All of those are consistent. The behavior is exactly what one would expect at an MC-esque type roast, which is what they do at every Academy Award, right? So everything up to that point, you've got laughter, laughter, laughter. Then obviously you see the reaction by Jada. She doesn't say anything, but she doesn't need to because her facial expressions very well speak for themselves. Will catches a whiff of that, whether it's direct or indirect, and all of a sudden, what's he do? He gets up and he storms the stage. He slaps Chris, something that I think everybody and anybody can agree, whether you think that he was justified in doing it, we'll talk about that later or not, it's unprecedented in terms of the Academy. This has never happened, right? So this is a totally unprecedented reaction. After the laugh, we have the slap. Then we have the violent, aggressive words out of his own mouth, the threatening words that he makes to Chris Rock, which you and I are going to explain why that may have actually constituted another independent crime. And then you fast forward about 20 or 25 minutes later when Will Smith goes to get his award for Best Actor, and he's standing in front of the Academy literally crying. So he's gone from laughing to slapping to crying. And then about 2 hours later, there's more footage of Will Smith at an after party dancing and rapping and singing like, just another night out on the town. So that emotional continuum that this man was on during that, say, 3.5 hour time frame in and of itself suggests a lot of either mental imbalance or chemically induced mental imbalance. One of the two.
Chemical. I think he had an episode. Honestly, I think he had an episode. I think it's long coming. But getting back to the theme of the story, of our show, why are we bringing this up as part of what we're talking about? Well, we talked about it briefly before we came on the air. The echo effect, right? 10 years ago, nobody would have had their wildest dreams ever thought that anybody could possibly do something like this. As shocking as this really was only shocking because it was Hollywood themselves, right? It was Chris Rock and everybody in Hollywood around there, and you would think that they understand what's going on and they respect each other and they care about each other. But the truth of the matter is, I think this is a long time coming, Mike, and this comes from society for many years now, certain groups, and it's not just one, there's several different groups, depending on who's doing the talking, who want to silence people. And why do they want to silence people? Because they say that words are violent and words can hurt and words are just like a weapon. And the echo of those behavior, people accepting that, people allowing others to do that to people, is this. This is the natural progression, which is something that I used to talk about on my shows that I've had in the past where it wasn't law-based, is whenever somebody says something, what I like to do, and I think what most critical thinkers do, is you always take it to its logical progression. Should we do this? Well, what would be the logical progression of that? The logical progression of what's been happening over these years is the echo effect that you're talking about. Will Smith thought, if you insult me, those are violent, painful, dangerous words, and I'm allowed to hit you back. Okay? It started many years ago with racial slurs. I think that's and this is unofficial, my own memory, which is failing 90% of the time as I'm getting older. But I think it started with the racial slurs where you would hear somebody insult a black person or even a Hispanic and they would get slapped and the cops would show up and say, "Oh, well, you did use a racial slur." And I remember back then thinking, and it happened to me. I don't know how often it ever happened to you being Jewish, but as a Hispanic growing up in the 70s, you used to
What are
have.
you trying to say, Ed? What are you trying to say?
Oh, listen, you guys are when you guys get
Go
persecuted.
keep it up. It's going to be me and you in the parking lot, pal.
Here's the beauty about here's the good and the bad news about being Jewish. The low level persecution hardly ever happens, but man, when they come after you guys, it's serious.
Well,
It's
the other
like,
thing is we've had about 5,000 years to get used to it. So
it's like, no, we're not just going to insult you. We're just going to kill you. But I've dealt with it, and I remember even when it used to happen to me, thinking it's a bad precedent to start punching people in the face. I mean, I did it in junior high. Those were the fights I got to in middle school. But as an adult, I realized that it was a bad precedent.
So I think you bring up two salient points, and they're not really law points. They're just human
We're going to get into it.
societal.
But we're going to get into
societal points. But the
law.
2 points that you bring up are there's a big difference between kids on a playground and adults, particularly adults in the Academy Awards, but adults and kids in general. And the second thing is we're all taught as children the basic rhyme, which is a rule of life that sticks and stones may break my bones, but names will never hurt me. It's not nice to call people names. It's not nice to call people racial slurs or call them fat or skinny or make fun of their race or their gender or their sex or anything. But no matter what, whether you call somebody a racial slur or whether you call somebody an insensitive sexual slur or what have you, at the end of the day, it may be in bad taste, but it's only a word. And there may be other recourse, but what the recourse does not include is an act of physical violence.
Right. And
So
now, can I segue? Let me segue into something. Because
Sure.
it's perfect what you just said to segue into something you said earlier about when Will Smith yells out at him, "Keep my wife's name out of your effing mouth." Now, words like that.
And let's get into the why of that in 1 second, because before we do that, that's where we're going to go. But before we do that, I want to define terms, because many people don't know the legal distinction or definition of very simple terms that they throw around every single day and they've heard a million times, but they really don't know what they mean.
True.
So in Florida, I mean everywhere, but here in Florida, we're speaking specifically because different jurisdictions have different definitions, even for the same crime that can sometimes be interpreted differently in another venue. But here in Florida, the word assault means some action by an individual which causes a fear that is reasonable in another individual that an imminent act of violence is coming. It basically means that I have said or done something, and words could be enough depending upon the words, but it's got to be coupled with an act and an apparent ability to complete that act.
Right.
So there's not only your own sensitivity, because obviously people are on sliding scales, right? Some people are more sensitive to some things than others. So it's not just subjective, but it's also objective. So it has to appear not only to you, but to John or Jane Q. citizen, Joe or Jane Q. average, that what was said and what was done could reasonably be interpreted as imminent violence to which you need to act in order to protect yourself, right? The battery, on the other hand, that's an assault. An assault, you don't actually have touching. You only have something that leads to the thought that the touching is imminent.
Right. And Will Smith did that because
wait, let's get there in a second. Let's just continue defining terms. The battery is an actual act, which is some violent action against another person. Now, that's a sliding scale. So I can commit a battery if I smack Ed across the face without his consent. That's a battery. If I do it with a weapon, let's say I use a baseball bat or I pistol whip him or I have brass knuckles on, that's an aggravated battery with a weapon or potentially a deadly weapon. But either way, it's a crime for me to physically touch Ed. I don't even have to actually touch Ed. I can put something in motion that causes Ed to be touched. For instance, I could spit on him, right? Or I could throw a baseball at him. Those are still batteries, both of them.
Or you can
And
knock
by
over,
the way,
or you could tip over a bookshelf knowing full well the bookshelf was going to hit me. That's
knowledge
bad.
and intent, right? Knowledge and intent. So, like, if you have the idea of dominoes, right? If I'm knocking over the pile of dominoes, but my plan is that they're going to land on Ed, that's a battery. So there's a difference between assault and battery. So going back to what we saw in the video, here's the 3 questions which you can address in order. 1, did Chris Rock commit a criminal act when he made his statement, his G.I. Jane joke? 2, did Will Smith commit a criminal act when he approached and smacked Chris Rock? And 3, did Will Smith commit a criminal act when he returned to his seat and yelled the threat to keep my wife's name out of your effing mouth?
Actually, I'm going to take it, if I could, I'm going to take it slowly, and I want to talk about, because we didn't even talk about this earlier, but I think it's a good idea to take it slowly and talk about, on top of all of that, what Chris Rock's reactions could have been legally or illegally.
Yeah.
At the
Well,
time.
let's talk about Will, and then we'll talk about Chris. Let's start with Will.
Let's take one. Did he commit any criminal act? Well, based on what you said, no, he didn't, because there was no apparent threat that he was going to do any harm to anybody. He just insulted her,
right?
At worst.
So I think you and I,
it wasn't even an insult, right?
You and I are in agreement that the worst case scenario when we first start this thing is that Chris Rock's joke is offensive.
That's it.
That's the absolute worst case scenario there.
And you might not even be able to argue that it's offensive. You may, but you can't say anything more, especially because this is what happens in the law. When you take into account Will Smith's state of mind going to the Academy Awards, very similar to going to a comedy show. You knew coming in that there were going to be jokes made, and you knew coming in, because of your history in the past, that some of those jokes were going to be made towards you and your wife, because it's happened in the past, specifically to you and Jada Pinkett Smith. It's not the first time they've made jokes about him. And you're at the Academy Awards and you're up for an award, and that always happens. So on top of all of that, there's just no way that you can say that this was anything more than just an offensive joke.
So no matter where it was, let's say that you and I don't know one another. We're at a bar. You're with your wife, or let me take that back. I'm with my wife. I'm not married, so I'm with my make-believe wife.
So it's a fantasy.
And you say, well, you'll understand why I'm switching it to me instead of you. And you say you're there with other people, and you lean over to one of your buddies and say, "You see that guy over there wearing the white shirt? Man, if that's not the ugliest woman I've ever seen in my life with him, I hope that's not his wife."
Right.
Insulting? Sure. Right. Poor taste? Sure.
But my point is,
but is it a crime?
Right. No, absolutely not. But I'm saying,
does it justify? Now, what if anything am I justified in doing in retaliation to that?
Nothing. Saying to me that what I just said was offensive.
Absolutely. So I could say to you, "Oh, excuse me, are you talking about my wife, sir?" and put you on the spot, right? I could do that. Right. Is that a crime?
No. Not.
What if I say to you, "Hey, son of a bitch, you say another word about my wife, I'm going to deck you"? Is that a crime?
Well, here depends. Depends. If you're sitting across the big bar, one of those round bars, and you're sitting on the other side of the bar, not yet. However, if you get up and start walking towards me right after you said it, or as you're saying it, yes, because now there is an apparent ability for you to do something about it, and those were threatening. Those were fighting words, which actually is in the case law. It's called fighting words.
Let me read the exact definition so that the audience gets it. An assault in Florida is, quote, an intentional, unlawful threat by word or act to do violence to the person of another, coupled with an apparent ability to do so, and doing some act which creates a well-founded fear in such other person that such violence is imminent. So there's a lot of steps, right? So when I'm yelling at you from the other side of the bar, or even if I'm standing next to you and I say something like, "What's the problem here? Don't talk about my wife like that," there's no crime. But if I do the opposite, where I get up and I say, what the fuck, and I start coming at you and I start walking towards the bar and I'm barking at you violently, arguably I've committed an assault at that point.
Just like, let me throw another one in there. Now, what if you were to say to me, if you say something about my wife again, I'm going to kick your ass? Is that even an assault? No.
It depends. Do I have an apparent ability, and did I do anything in furtherance of those words?
Still not an assault unless I get up and I said something. Now, if I say something again about your wife and you get up, and this is why, Michael, because it's a qualifier. If you notice what I said, that you said to me, if I say something about your wife again, you're going to kick my ass. I would have to say something about your wife for you to have to do physical harm.
Right, but arguably, if I'm up and coming towards you from the other side as I'm saying that, then arguably that qualifier may not be a distinction. Again, the point is there's got to be more to it. So, and by the way, folks, we're Florida lawyers. We're not California lawyers. We don't know what the hell California law is. I don't even know if there are any laws in California.
I don't think
there are any laws in California. But either way, so we're analyzing this situation as if it had occurred here in Florida. Right. So please understand that. So
and bear with us when it becomes complicated and a little confusing. But that is exactly why you need to hire a lawyer, because it is complicated and confusing. Sometimes to judges, sometimes to prosecutors, sometimes to us as defense lawyers. So don't think you can resolve this on your own, because you can't. I'm telling you.
What is not
bitch slap is complicated.
What is not complicated is that in no universe, other than in somebody's warped, misinformed mind that wants to believe what it wants to believe and ignores reality and the law, there is no world in which Chris Rock's words, no matter how distasteful, constituted a criminal act or a threat of violence.
Right.
Impossible. That is a legal and factual impossibility.
So let's move on. So we got the one.
We move on to Will Smith's reaction. All right. He gets up. He traverses the walkway, however many feet, 20, 25 feet. I don't know how long it is.
And I'm a little disappointed, by the way, because that was a perfect opportunity for him to walk on the catwalk, and he just blew that chance. But anyway, go ahead.
He walks up and he just smacks Chris Rock. Right. He doesn't have any. He just literally walks up, and we would call that the textbook illustration of a bitch slap. Although I would call that more of a sissy slap, because it really wasn't that much of a slap. But still, whatever. That was a bitch slap, right? He just walked up and smacked him. That's a whole other
issue of how embarrassing it should be that he's that big and Chris Rock is that little, and he didn't knock him on his ass. But.
Well, and plus he played Ali, so theoretically he ought to at least know how to throw a punch. But be that as it may, look, give him the benefit of the doubt that he intentionally held back and did just enough to get his attention and make his point without causing any injury. Let's say that was the mental calculus there, and he was still doesn't make a difference. If you go by Florida law, now let me define battery. By Florida law, battery is actually and intentionally touching or striking another person against that person's will. So unless Chris Rock had welcomed the smack, right, which you could do here in Florida. I don't know about other states, but here in Florida, there is a exception to the battery law called mutual combat. If you and I decide that we want to have a fight to work out our differences, right, we reach that agreement.
The textbook scenario is you say that my wife is the ugliest person you've ever seen, and I
never say that.
Because she's not. Now, you can say it about me, but then I wouldn't get offended because it's true. I would say, let's say I turn to you and I say, oh, really? You got a problem with that, buddy? Let's step outside. I walk outside and you follow me outside.
Right.
And we get into a fist fight.
Just like I just watched the other night Good Will Hunting for like the 67.
Please don't bring up What About Them Apples.
No,
please don't bring up that.
Right before that scene of the What About Your Apples, there's that exact situation occurred with Will Hunting. The exact situation that you just described.
Mm-hmm. And it doesn't matter who wins at that point, right? Because
remember when he says to the guy, you're just here insulting my friend, blah, blah, blah. But he goes, of course, if you have a problem with that, we could step outside in the parking lot and talk about it, work it out between us. And the guy says, no, that's okay. And he walks away, right? That's exactly what you're talking about.
Right.
That's called mutual.
So we're crystal clear. At that point, Michael and I get in the parking lot. It doesn't matter who wins. right? Michael could come out and beat me up, and I can't press any charges against Michael, or I could beat up Michael, and Michael's not going to be able. I mean, you could try, but you're not going to win if you get a good lawyer. Neither of us would win that.
Unless the rules get changed, and let's say we get out to the parking lot and one of us pulls out a bat or a knife or something,
Well,
and then it's a different story.
Right.
But again,
or
so-
you get out to the parking lot and you try to walk back in and say, you know what, forget it, I don't want to do this, and you start walking back in, and I go after you, then because the
so
scenario
at this point, okay, we have at least one crime committed by Will Smith if we're arguing Florida law. There's no question that Will Smith committed a battery on Chris Rock. There is no affirmative defense to that battery of being reasonably provoked or defending himself from a crime committed by Chris Rock against him, right? In other words, he can't say, and I don't want to get too far into this because we're going to talk about defenses in a little bit, but he can't get up there and say, oh, no, the only reason I did it was because Chris Rock was going to hit me first, and I had to do
or my wife. Or my wife.
Or he was going to hit my wife. Mere words. Sticks and stones may break my bones.
There's also another defense there for Chris if he would argue that. Even if it were true, I still think Jada could kick Chris Rock's ass. I'm just saying.
The other thing is, arguably, if we're gonna like you said when we were talking about the thought process and taking things to their logical conclusions, or in this case, their most absurd yet potentially logical conclusions, arguably he committed a burglary. Arguably he committed a first-degree PBL, a burglary with a battery. While he was an invitee and he was welcome to be inside of the arena for the event, he had no authority to walk up the stage at that point in time. He wasn't accepting an award. He wasn't a presenter. He trespassed, which could be considered potentially a unlawful entry or a burglary, especially if the intent was to commit a criminal act, to wit, battery.
Right.
So one could make that argument.
Mike, and don't go too far for the audience to understand. Don't go too far. How often, which I'm sure you'll admit with me, is quite often, do we get clients that are charged with burglaries and they were having an argument with their, let's say, for example, with their girlfriend or boyfriend. The one person walked out with the phone and go inside the car. We're going to call somebody, and they reach in the car and yank the phone out. And that's all they did. Never punched anybody, never touched. Just reached
Burglary with an assault.
And they get charged with a burglary, with a punishable by life.
Yep, no bond.
Punishable by life, no bond, because they did that. It happened. So don't think it's absurd. Maybe in California it wouldn't happen.
Well, but I think it's still a stretch. But my point is that what Will Smith did, no matter how noble he may have thought it to be in that moment, was clearly criminal. Clearly. There's no other way to look at this other than it's criminal, unless, of course, you just refuse to accept reality, which some people do. There are people still arguing, oh, no, that was perfectly justified. He had every right to do it. He shouldn't have said anything about his wife. Okay, fine. But we shouldn't say a lot of things that we say. It doesn't entitle people to use violence. There are other remedies. There are other means of recourse.
The flip side of that argument is, if you know you're going to the Oscars and you're going to sit in the front row and you're going to sit with somebody who's nominated for Best Actor, because you've been doing this for 30, 40 years, that they're going to roast you. So maybe what you should have done, if you don't want people to make fun of your disorder or your disease, is stay home. I mean, if you want to get that stupid and that absurd, you could be just as stupid and absurd and say, if you don't like people making fun of your medical condition, then stay home. And that's not a solution either. So,
and so let's go now to the last of the three incidents, and that's when Will Smith returns back to his seat and then starts yelling, "Keep my wife's name out of your effing mouth." And you can look, we watched the video just now. You see his face. I mean, this guy's not laughing. He's deadly serious. He just smacked him. So, there's been an act of violence, and now there is a threat of further violence, even though it's conditional. If you blah, blah, blah. Well, he didn't say if. He said keep it. Whatever the case. There's an arguable condition that if Chris doesn't say anything and doesn't mention the wife's name again, he won't do whatever it is that it's implied that he's going to do, because he doesn't actually say, if you say my wife's name, I'm going to do X, Y, or Z, or keep my wife's name out of your mouth, or I'm going to do X, Y, or Z.
But I think it's reasonable. It's reasonable to assume that what he meant was that the violence is going to escalate if he doesn't.
And that therein lies another assault. Okay, by Florida law, those are not mere words. Those are what you have called correctly fighting words. That is an intentional word, which is a threat of violence against another person, coupled with the apparent ability to do so, and some act creating a well-founded fear, to wit, the slap that already occurred. So not only was Will Smith wrong, he was double wrong and potentially triple wrong. There's no universe where his actions are okay, except the Oscars, which leads to Hollywood privilege, right? They asked, this has all come out since after the incident, right? Apparently, he was asked to leave. And I'm using the word asked because that's the word that everybody says. He wasn't dragged out. He wasn't escorted out. He wasn't handcuffed. He wasn't perp walked. They simply said, Mr. Smith, would you please leave? And he said, no. And he went back to his seat and he sat there and nobody said or did anything. In fact, yeah, the only thing they did was invited him upstage to collect an Oscar for Best Actor. So if that had been an audience member, let's say that Chris Rock had made the joke and it was a generic joke about the same type of thing.
I'm sorry, Mike. I'm laughing, but how funny would it have been for Chris Rock to have walked over and taken the Best Actor envelope before they read it, opened it up, and went, Javier Bardem, and then ripped it up and put it in his pocket. But like, screw you, Will. You're not getting shit tonight.
Well, you know what? To Chris Rock's look, I mean, the guy's a comedian, and I don't know him personally, obviously. I don't know anything about him. As a human being, but I do know how he chose to comport himself that particular evening. And I certainly know how he's chosen to comport himself subsequent, right? This guy could be on every talk show, every TV show, every news network right now, giving interviews and getting free press and racking his ticket prices through the roof and selling out. But he's not. His prices have gone up and I'm sure his sales have gone up.
They have.
But he's done this with complete dignity and class.
Yeah.
So that said, let's go to the other side of the coin. All right, let's talk about Chris. And let's talk about the reaction on his end and how he dealt with it and how he could have dealt with it. Right. So he makes a joke, and Will Smith is now walking up the ramp. I don't know because I've never seen a camera angle from behind Chris showing me what Will Smith looks like.
I've seen it. He starts laughing and he goes, he even says it in the clip you showed. He says, Richard, like the character he played, he goes, oh, here he comes, laughing. He thought, I'm pretty sure he thought, like everybody else.
No, I'm not talking about Chris. I'm talking about the opposite angle. I can't tell you what Will Smith. Right.
Gotcha.
So I'm trying to figure what is Chris Rock seeing when Wilson, because first of all, he's probably thinking to himself, why on earth is this guy coming up the stage right now? Because, again, this is completely unprecedented and unexpected. It's never happened, as far as I know, in the decades history of the Academy Awards. No non-invited celebrity has ever just sua sponte walked up the ramp towards a presenter. But regardless of whether it's happened before or not, again, I haven't seen it if it exists, a reverse camera angle from behind Chris Rock showing Will Smith's facial expression that Chris Rock is observing as this man is coming towards him, right? Does he have closed fists? Is he, snarling? Is he smiling? I don't know what Chris Rock is thinking. But I can tell you this, if Chris Rock is thinking, what in God's earth is this guy doing? Is he going to punch me? If that is the thought process, Chris Rock might have been justified in throwing the first punch.
Right.
Why?
But I think we would need a little more than just Will Smith walking towards him. Again, because of the scenario that we're in, they are actually supposedly they were friendly. I don't know if they were friends, but allegedly they were friendly and they've known each other. I think they worked on a movie together.
Let's just run out on a limb real quick on a tangent. Let's accept this as a premise for the moment. Let's say that Chris Rock sees Will Smith coming at him after he made a joke about his wife, and the wife had the guttural reaction that we all saw, and Will Smith went from laughing to looking at his wife, and now he's coming up stage, and while he's doing it, his eyes are squinted, his face is growled, and he's clenching his fists, and he's storming up towards Chris Rock. Just assume for a moment that that's what Chris Rock sees.
Yeah, then Chris Rock has every right to do that. He has every right to pull a firearm on him to keep him at bay. He has every right, because Will Smith is bigger. Chris Rock is, at least 40 pounds smaller than Will Smith. Chris Rock, although Will Smith is also in his 50s, Chris Rock, I believe, is also in his 50s. So he's an older gentleman. And he feared, if he legitimately felt fear, Chris Rock would have had a right to punch him, hit him with a weapon, pull a fire. Now, not shoot him, but he would have had a right to pull a firearm on him, because in Florida, and you understand your ground, you can meet force with force just to stop the attack. So whatever Chris Rock felt was necessary to stop Will Smith from approaching him, he would have had every right to do.
Within reason, so long as it's objectively reasonable.
Right, exactly. Just enough to stop him. So he wouldn't have been justified to shoot him, wouldn't have been justified to hit him in the head with a baseball bat and keep pummeling him, but he might have been justified to hold a bat if he had one or whatever. In this case, Chris had nothing.
So
could have given him a paper cut. Could have given him a paper cut with the envelope he was holding.
This is what we call in the law an affirmative defense. An affirmative defense is an explanation as to why you acted, and it legally justifies your action, which would otherwise constitute a crime. Okay? So in this particular instance, we're talking about self-defense and stand your ground. Here in Florida, the basic difference between self-defense and stand your ground is that stand your ground is self-defense on steroids. Self-defense basically says that you can use that amount of force which is reasonably necessary to protect yourself against an imminent act of violence, or an act of violence against another, or even your property in certain circumstances. Self-defense has a limitation, though. Self-defense requires that you have a duty to retreat if you can. If you can retreat, you must retreat. In other words, your default reaction cannot be, oh, great, I finally get the opportunity to kick somebody's ass or shoot somebody in the face. That's not self-defense. Self-defense means if you can get away without doing it, you have to first do that, and that's got to be proven. But here in Florida, we have removed that duty to retreat and said, no, you can stand your ground no matter where you are inside the jurisdiction of the state of Florida. And that stems from self-defense at home, which is also a doctrine called the Castle Doctrine. So under the Castle Doctrine, you can exercise self-defense in your own home without any duty to retreat. So stand your ground is self-defense on steroids. It's an application of the Castle Doctrine to self-defense anywhere inside the state of Florida. It doesn't limit you to your home. So again, I don't know whether that applies in California or not, but here in Florida, that's the law.
And for the naysayers around the country, and even some people here who don't like the stand your ground, I remember when the stand your ground statute came out. I was actually the prosecutor. I believe it was 2005. And I remember thinking it could lead to some very potentially dangerous and criminal acts on the part of people, thinking that they were, using it as self-defense. But I also remember thinking at the time, it's a logical conclusion once again, right? Why? Because in a lot of scenarios here in Florida, if you remember, especially in the 80s, Michael, in the 90s, remember all the tourists that were being carjacked and then killed. So that's what happened is, so if you're told you have to retreat, but the criminal does not allow you to retreat, how are you then supposed to defend yourself? So they changed the law because of that. And that's why the law was changed. And you can see how that could be an issue. Now, if we go back to the scenario that we're talking about here, we already discussed what Chris Rock could do as Will Smith was approaching. But once Will Smith smacked him, if Will Smith stood there, Chris Rock had every right to fight back. But Mike, what about the scenario that we actually witnessed? Quick bitch slap, Will Smith turns around and walks away. Is Chris allowed to chase him and tackle him and beat his ass? He's not. And explain to them why.
So it would be like Sheriff Buford T. Justice said in Smokey and the Bandit. You can think about it, but don't do it. Right?
Why exactly? And tell them why. Why is that?
Because the crime is now complete. So the act of self-defense is to prevent the act of violence. if you engage in that act of self-defense after the violence has occurred and the threat has abated, you are now committing a new independent act of violence. You go from a victim to an aggressor, and the aggressor cannot assert self-defense or stand your ground.
So let me explain it so they can understand conceptually. Will Smith bitch slaps him and stands there. Doesn't do anything else, but just stands there. Chris Rock could have clocked him because he's still a threat. He's right there. He just slapped him. He's a threat. Chris Rock blocks. He can nail him because there was the threat and it was still ongoing. But Chris Rock was shocked, and then Will Smith walked away. The minute they disengage, then Chris would have become the aggressor. Now, in a lot of people's worlds, including some, old timers like ourselves, some might say, well, to hell with that. I mean, you're just going to have to take the bitch slap and just stand there? I'm not talking morals. I'm not talking ethics. I'm not talking personal opinions.
We're talking law.
We're simply talking the law. No, you can't do it. You can't go after him because he disengaged and he left you.
So now Will Smith is sitting in his chair and he says what he says angrily, right? Can Chris Rock say, all right, you know what? Hell with that. Walk himself down the stage, walk right up to Will Smith and pop him in the face?
Nope. No, because
what about if Chris Rock?
I'm sorry. Let me just make sure clear. Because Will Smith said what he said. Number one, it's conditional. Number two, he didn't do anything overtly to make Chris Rock think, here we go again.
But what if Chris Rock now says, let's say Chris Rock's not the classy guy that he proved himself to be. And let's say that he turns around and says, oh, really? Well, how about this? Your wife is so ugly, and just goes into a rant on Jada jokes.
Yeah, he's much classier than I am because I definitely would have said, instead of slapping me for having your wife's name in my mouth, you should be slapping the dudes that are inside your wife's mouth. But that's just me.
Let's say that Chris Rock had now taken the low ground and started making more Jada jokes immediately in that moment in direct response to Will's threat. Is Will now justified in walking right back up that stage and punching him again?
No, I don't.
Absolutely not. It's another battery. Words alone are not enough. Sticks and stones. I don't care how upset you are. I don't care how offended you are. I don't care how insulted you are. I don't care how much you think you need to stand up for your wife's dignity.
Honestly, it would have been a smart move on Chris Rock's part to make a lot of money and get Will Smith criminally arrested because he could have sued him big time.
He could have done it at that point in time. He really could have poked that bear. He was invited to do it. And yet he didn't do it. But had he done it, it would not have justified another act of violence by Will Smith at all. So let's shift gears for a minute. Let's talk about the fact that we have isolated several crimes that have occurred here, at least two, right?
At least.
And so why was nothing done? This happened in real life in front of hundreds and hundreds of people, and then it's preserved on video and audio for the entire world to see in perpetuity, which tens of millions of people have seen.
Because you said it, Mike, you said it. It's the Hollywood elite privilege. They think they can do whatever they want. And this is the best part, because you talk about the two women and William H. Macy, that they got arrested and they did time.
Yeah.
What's the difference? It wasn't a criminal act committed on somebody else in Hollywood. This is Hollywood on Hollywood. This might as well be, and it was, black on black crime, Hollywood on Hollywood. You commit a crime, and any cop will tell you, one of the biggest problems they have with solving drive-by shootings and gang killings is nobody in the hood talks.
Nobody talks. But here, they don't need anybody to talk because they've got it on video.
Well, that's the issue, right? Because here's something that our clients don't understand many times, especially with domestic violence batteries, right? Is it necessary for Chris Rock to want to press charges on Will Smith? No.
And not only is it not necessary, but Chris Rock can say, I don't want to press charges. I refuse to press charges.
And let me tell something for any prosecutors who are listening to this show, they will love what I'm about to say. Get it through your thick heads, you victims. State attorneys, district attorneys, prosecutors are not your lawyer.
Oh, I like that little Biden move you pulled there.
your lawyer. They are the lawyers for the state or the county, as it may be, or the district, which is why they're called district attorneys. They are the lawyers for the citizens of that jurisdiction, meaning if they want to prosecute Will Smith, it's because they want to make sure that people like Will Smith know you cannot go around bitch slapping our citizens. So they could potentially try to compel Chris Rock to testify. But honestly, in this case, they don't even
need him.
Right. And why is that, Michael? Why don't they need him? So they understand.
Because they got it on video. They got the whole crime captured live. There's no, and again, because of the nature of this offense. So let's draw a distinction, right? In most of those DV cases, there's no independent objective proof. You usually don't have those things on videotape, right? I mean, every now and then you do.
You don't.
But normally, all you have is the testimony of the eyewitnesses, which may or may not be enough in a given case. But when you have a victim that doesn't want to cooperate, part of the problem that you have in a case like an assault or a battery is it's an essential element of the crime. One of the things the government has to prove beyond a reasonable doubt is that it was against the will of the victim. Right. It can't be consensual, again, because remember, if Chris and Will or Ed and I or Susie and Joan decide to engage in mutual combat, there's no crime. No matter what happens, there's no crime. So you have to be able to establish that it was not consensual. And you also have to be able to establish that there was no affirmative defense, right? If Ed and I have that argument and I have a self-defense claim, to prosecute me, they're going to definitely need to put Ed on the stand if I'm going to get up there and claim self-defense, because I don't know how they're going to say no self-defense, given that they don't have the other side of the story. But here it's on video.
Will does have that defense. Will Smith has one little sliver of a defense. But again, I think that defense can be defeated by others, and not necessarily Chris Rock. But they would need somebody to come forward that has knowledge of the incident to testify that it was not a joke. Because Will Smith could, if Chris Rock doesn't show up, Will Smith could take this to trial and say this. He could probably file a motion.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
And have a hearing and say,
at the end of the day, any defense attorney worth their weight, if first of all, this case would never get to a trial without a victim. It's not going to happen. How many times have you seen? I mean, I don't even know if I've ever seen it in my career when I'm thinking about it. Maybe I have once, where the state has proceeded on an assault or a battery without a victim. It almost never. I mean, I know you had it once as a prosecutor, but it is such a fluke for that to occur, because really you do need to be able to overcome those hurdles, and you have to meet your burden of proof. And so, any defense attorney,
in fairness to prosecutors, they're not going to do it unless it's a serious issue, like somebody who's
or they're provoked enough. You know, if they're pushed enough, provoked. Right?
They are human. Prosecutors are human. I always say that.
And some defense attorneys aren't too smart in the way that they choose to handle their cases. You know, I mean, there are times that you want to be, assertive and aggressive and argumentative, but as a general rule, you're better off being level and professional as opposed to impassioned and aggressive.
And a lot of clients think, because they watch too much TV, and they think that that's the better lawyer, but that's the worst lawyer. Because Michael, I like to make this example when clients hire me, right? Sometimes, depending on the scenario. But in this scenario, I liken it to this. I liken it to you hiring your own personal private assassin. You're bringing in a guy like the Old West to clean up the town because the rustlers are coming through. Well, the gunslinger you hired is going to have to kill people. Now, there's two ways he can do it. He can walk up to these rustlers and say, listen, like Clint Eastwood did. Perfect. I forget which one it is with the donkey, where he walks over to the four guys, and he says, you guys are laughing at my donkey. I don't appreciate that, but if you'll apologize. Now, Clint Eastwood could have come in there and said, you know what? F all of you mothers. I'm going to kill you all. You better. He can do that. But at the end of the day, he's going to kill them anyway. So when you hire a good lawyer like Michael and I, this is my point. We're going to do our job. And our job is to make sure that the state can prove it beyond a reasonable doubt. That's our killing. And we can do that the nice way by asking for an apology, because my donkey doesn't like to be laughed at. or we can walk in there and act like a fool. But I can guarantee you that if Clint Eastwood had come up to them and said, I'm going to kill you all, blah, 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 F and what, they would have been drawn already. See the difference? So it's always better to hire a lawyer who's going to do it the nice way, because we can still do what we have to do. We don't have to play those games. And then secondly, there's no reason to do that and insult a human being who's simply doing their job. Even when the prosecutors are overzealous, Michael, let's be honest. Rarely do we meet somebody who we think is just an effing ass, right? They're just young, they're mistaken, they're a little aggressive, their chiefs have been training them differently, they're having a bad day, they don't like my client because my client did something really, really stupid. They went beyond just committing the crime. Hardly ever is it, oh my God, no, this guy's just an asshole, like a real asshole.
Yet,
it's not.
Yet that is a pervasive problem in today's society. And I'm going to call it what it is. There's a word for this. It's triggered. That's the word, right? And we are a society right now, our nature is to be triggered by different people for different reasons. But there are very few people that escape this notion of being triggered, a sense of moral outrage over something, whatever it may be. You don't care about the environment enough. You're not sensitive to my sexual orientation or my pronoun that I want to use, whatever it might be. There's just an uncountable number of things that people can get triggered upon. But, 20, 30, 40 years ago, it wasn't as violent a response. It wasn't as outrageous a response as it is today. Or maybe it was, and just without technology and without social media, it didn't appear as.
No, I think you're onto something. I think you're right. I think it's escalated. I think everybody's trying to outrage everybody. Your insult of me is more outrageous than what happened yesterday in social media. Everybody. I think you're right. I think that part of that is what happened with Will Smith. I think everybody's trying to just outrage everybody, and
so I don't think. So it's funny.
People are going to start drawing weapons.
It's funny because I don't think Will Smith was triggered. I don't think Will Smith was triggered at all. I think Will Smith was laughing. I think he thought it was a funny as shit joke. I think he got it completely.
Well, I disagree with you, but I agree with you, but I disagree with you as well. I don't think Chris Rock triggered him. I think Jada triggered him.
No, exactly. That's what I'm saying. When the joke comes out, I think Will Smith was not triggered. He was perfectly fine. The minute that he sees Jada's reaction, he chooses to act, and he makes a look. He does absolute math in his mind. Yeah. He makes a calculus and decides this is what I need to do. I don't, again, I'm not in the man's head, so I don't presume to know the why of it, but I would speculate, and I don't think I would be too far on this limb to say that he felt that that was what he had to do in order to defend his wife's integrity, because that's what she expected, not anybody else in the arena. I don't think he was thinking about anybody else in the arena. I don't think he was thinking about his children. I don't think he was thinking about himself. I don't think he was thinking about the award that he was going to get. I think he was thinking.
Right, I agree with you. I agree with you 100%. And if you really analyze the joke, how bad was it?
It was so bad that everyone in the audience was laughing. Okay, that's how bad.
But I don't even think it was an insult. I think he even says to her, "I love you."
Right.
Waiting for the bald head looks great. I mean, you really could take that a bunch of different ways.
And you're right, by the way, what you said. There are many things he could have said, either in substitution or in addition, that would have taken that to a whole different level. And he didn't go there.
He could have compared her to Michael Jordan or Kojak, which I think would have been more insulting because he's saying she looks like a man. But he said she looked like Demi Moore, who, by the way, was really sexy in that movie with a bald head. So
here's what's interesting, right? I don't think triggered applies to Will Smith. I think Will Smith made a really piss poor decision for the wrong reason. But triggered applies to this situation in many ways. Several people came up and put their arms around Will Smith immediately, congratulating him as if he had done such a great thing by going up there and smacking Chris Rock. In that moment, as soon as he went back to his chair, they were all over him like he was just, Mr. Wonderful. Plenty of people stood up and said, and I don't know how many of them are doing it today as opposed to a week ago, but plenty of people got up there and said that he was perfectly justified because what Chris Rock did was so wrong, meaning they were triggered. They were triggered by the temerity of a comedian to joke about an Academy Award nominee's wife, his medical condition. Which,
well, and that's even debatable because we don't even know if he knew she had a medical.
But assume she did. Doesn't matter whether they did or didn't. It's irrelevant to the fact that third parties who have absolutely nothing to do with this, maybe they suffer from that same condition, but they're triggered. Okay, it triggered them, and their reaction to it was, if I were Will Smith, I'd have done the same thing. That was the right reaction. Why? Because they're triggered. So.
But in fairness, I just want to interrupt you. In fairness, I don't know anybody who went up to him in the moment to say he did a great job. I do know that apparently Denzel Washington came up to him and told him that he needed to pray, and he sat with him and told him, remember, at your highest moment is when the devil comes for you. So Denzel, I think, also acted amazingly because he didn't criticize him, he didn't condemn him, he didn't judge him, but he did judge the act, which is what I tell people all the time. I don't necessarily judge people. I'm not judging Will Smith. I'm judging the act that he committed. And what he did was wrong. And Denzel went up and told him what you did was wrong. And I think Bradley Cooper also came up to him and told him that, he needed to calm down, that, this wasn't worth it and it wasn't the right thing to do. So I don't know about anybody else, but I think those two did go up to him and tell him he was wrong.
My point is there are definitely people who were triggered as a result of this incident.
Oh, for sure. And all over social media. How many people on social media were okay with this, which is another shocking development.
The thing that I want to get across at the end of the day, apart from the fact that sticks and stones may break my bones and that violence is not the answer to words, no matter how much you don't like them, is the concept of this echo effect, because this is a very high profile incident that many people are going to know about and think about for a long time and talk about. And it will, because of, in large part, technology and the fact that people can watch this over and over again, and even the cartoon that we showed at the beginning of this thing, obviously a joke, satire. But you know what? That will trigger some people. So, I hate to use the expression. Actually, I don't hate to use the expression. I'm going to use the expression because why not? Don't get your panties in a bunch, okay? Just take a deep breath.
Yeah, that's not misogynistic. On the contrary, you're very woke. I understand that a lot of men wear panties nowadays, so you're not doing anything.
My point being, you gotta lighten up, Francis. To take the stripes line. Lighten up, Francis.
Lighten up, Francis.
You can't get so pissed off that you allow your anger to cause you to commit violent acts or do stupid things that can jeopardize you and your family. That's just, it ain't worth it.
And here's another point on why, on that note, why is it that the DA in California, because they're district attorneys out there, should charge Will Smith? And Will Smith should probably, look, nothing major, maybe just 6 months probation, some community service hours, maybe 3 months probation. But he needs to be charged. And you know why, Michael? Because of what you said. The echo effect of his act as well from going forward. People are going to see like, hey, if a comedian insults me, I can go up and smack him. Some guy on the street says something I don't like, I can go up and bitch slap him. Well, they need to do something. And this is what prosecutors do it.
This dovetails into the idea of cancel culture, which is a whole similarly related topic that we'll, address one day in some appropriate forum. But for today, let's just leave the audience with this. Pro tip, chill. Take a chill pill, okay? Take a deep breath. No matter how outraged you are, unless somebody comes at you and you really are fearing for your physical safety, for your life, for your limb, that you reasonably and realistically believe somebody is going to hurt you, and I'm not talking about insulting you with a word, I mean physically hurt you, just shut up, okay? Walk away, take a breath, go somewhere else, do whatever you need to do to avoid it, because in that situation, you're going to be better off doing the traditional stand your ground predicate of retreating as opposed to committing the act of violence, because unless you're Will Smith and unless you're at the Academy Awards And unless you're in a state like California where people don't get arrested for anything, and even when they do get arrested, they don't get prosecuted, and even when they do get prosecuted, their charges get dropped, that ain't Florida, baby. We don't work that way here.
And it won't be
Here-
California for long, my friend. Mark my words. That's not going to last. It's going to change.
Well,
it's going to have to.
Be that as it may, that's the West Coast problem. Here we're worried about the East Coast problem. So Ed and I want you to know, keep your cool. But if you don't, and should things go south for any reason, then remember Haber PA's tagline, #UpX2. Shut up and lawyer up. Don't talk. Don't say anything. Don't make any statements to the police. Don't explain the why of things to them. Just pick up the phone and call your local trusted criminal defense attorney and let us do the talking for you. Our statements are not admissible as evidence. And if anybody's going to talk you out of a crime, it's going to be your lawyer, not you.
And remember something else. Wait, one last thing, because we always forget this. And it's important for people to understand. When you're sitting there on the side of the road with the cop and you're talking, you're trying to explain yourself and you're trying to come up with good defenses and reasons why you did what you did. Those comments will never, ever, ever be admissible because there's something in the law that will not allow them, that allow your defense attorney to use those statements. Mike, you want to?
Self-serving statement?
They're called self-serving hearsay statements or self-serving statement. So no matter what you say, everything you say on that side of the road is either A, going to be used against you, or B, no one will ever allow you to use it in favor of you. So it's the stupidest thing to do. I know we all get that. I've done it myself. You've really got to understand, just be quiet and say, sorry, I'll talk to you when my lawyer's present. That's it.
Well, with that said, I want to thank everybody for watching today. We really do appreciate your time. I hope that you got some good information and that we gave a little bit of a different take than that which every single news entity and social media entity on the planet has been doing for the last 8 days. Hopefully we were a little more interesting, entertaining, and capable. And in any event, we thank you for your attention and your time, and we look forward to being back at your service next week on the 11th. So thanks for coming,
everyone.
Ed.
Thank
Take
you,
care,
Mike. Good
y'all,
to see you.
and we'll get this thing uploaded to YouTube ASAP. Thanks again, folks.